Welcome to the Magic Hour, a safe haven for lost stories and curious folk.
Last year, in our first season, we explored the topic of grief through the lens of an old story, the Wild Swans, also known as the Seven Swans or the Six Swans. It goes by many names and has many variations, but a few themes stay the same: transformation, wild swans, a witch's curse, royal children that undergo persecution, and a sister's heroic deeds. We discussed how grief in our lives have transformed us, much like the enchanted siblings, and what aspects of the story resonated with some of the grief we carry in our lives. It's funny how stories tend to mirror personal narrative.
So, for this episode, we'll revisit the same tale, but from different angles. We're not going into detail on heavy topics, but just the same, we hope that you are in a good place to listen to us share.
Yes, well, let's get cozy. So, I, in the last few months, have revisited the story in two different versions. One was told Martin Shaw has a Substack and he records a lot, and he did a oral retelling of the Six Swans, he called it. And I listened to it and I was intrigued by some of it was a shorter telling, and there were many things the same, but a few key things were different. And I also had read Jackie Morris's retelling. She had done this beautiful illustrated book, which I will link in our show notes, of the story, but it had all these, it's just like interspersed with these beautiful paintings. And I just got very academic about it, and I started
Love it.
reading through both and noticing the differences and always comparing them to the first version I actually heard, which was what I spoke about in the original episode we did, Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marie from New Zealand, who writes fantasy novels. And so I wanted to just share what I learned first, to kind of remind us of the story and get us into the mindset of the story.
Yeah, it's a few people that might not even know this story.
Yeah, they might not know. So, key thing, there's a king. He's lost in the woods. For some reason, I think the phrase "king is lost in the woods," there's something very meaningful to me about that.
Sure.
Whether you want to think that you're the one lost in the woods or the king, maybe our society, the leaders of our society are lost in the woods. Whatever you want to bring to that image in your head. He's lost in the woods, and there's an old woman, a forest witch, and she is like, "I'll help you, but you need to marry my daughter."
Yeah, if.
And also, this witch happens to take the form of a white hare, and she is glowing in the dark, and she leads the king to this place. And there's this, yeah, in both versions, in both Martin Shaw and Jackie Morris's version, and this white hare leads him to this place.
That's
This
fantastic.
otherworldly place. He can't find his way back to the castle, and there's this woman there, her daughter, the witch's daughter, and he has this feeling like she knew he was coming. She seems not fully light-filled. She seems foreboding is the word. And he brings her back to the castle. He automatically just gets back to the castle with no problem because he's agreed to this. And also, side note, he had lost his wife a few years before. And with this wife, he had, in this version, 6, and in Jackie Morris's 12. 11, because 12 is the daughter. So
Right.
11 sons, and in Martin Shaw, 6 sons.
Yeah,
And
which
he
is
has
the
one
Hans
daughter.
Christian Andersen versus the Grimm.
Yeah.
There's two kind of forks in the road. But
Yes.
interestingly to note, 7 and 12 are both very important numeric representations of completion and purity.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I was wondering if there's meaning in the numbers. So this king's in grief. Speaking of grief, he's lost his wife. He loved her very much. That part of the story is very elaborate in Daughter of the Forest. Juliet really goes into character development on his original wife and how much he loved her. So
Oh, wow.
It's more in depth in that book. And in these two versions, the king doesn't want this witch's daughter to know about his children. So he doesn't tell her about them, and he hides his children in this tower in the forest, and only he can get there with this ball of twine that leads him to it, and he can only get in. So he brings her back, but he hides his whole past and his children from the witch's daughter that he has to marry, and he secretly goes and visits them for years. And the witch's daughter is very resentful because she knows he's keeping something from him, and she kind of has just ended up in this position. It's like her mother's like, "You're going to marry this guy." And she's a witch too, and she can also turn into a hare. And so a quote from Martin Shaw's telling was, "It was a marriage of many concealments," which stood
Mm.
out to me as something very meaningful to me. Think about
Mm.
all the times we conceal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find myself in both versions feeling a level of compassion for this woman who's kind of been put into this situation. And she's trying to make it work, but she's being hidden, like things are being hidden from her. And she also wants children, and she's not getting any because the king's kind of living this double life. And so the witch's daughter, I keep calling her that, the witch wife, I guess, finds out, and she finds a way to this hidden tower, and she ends up casting a spell. I think the brothers in Martin Shaw's version, they come out of the tower and she casts the spell on them, and they fly away, but the only person that's left is the daughter, and the witch doesn't know about the daughter still in the tower. And then the witch goes back to the castle. In Jackie Morris's version, the daughter sends a message by dove to tell the king what's going on, because I forgot to say that the witch wife found the twine that led the king to it, and she threw it away, so the king can't get in anymore. So she's made it so the king can't even get to his children. The sons are swans, they've flown away, and the daughter's alone, and the king can't get to her, leaving her isolated. And all of this, by the way, is revenge.
Mm.
In Juliet's book, the New Zealand writer, the witch wife is jealous, it feels, of the daughter and the children. But in these
Yeah.
versions, it feels more like, "You're going to leave me out? I'm taking what you love. I didn't even want to
Mm.
be in the situation in the first place." Something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
an
that's the
interesting
take.
flip.
Yeah,
It's much more from a woman's perspective, whereas I think
yeah,
the Grimm's and like the original fairy tales, like you don't even really consider the motivation of this wife.
exactly. And I do like that, because how do people who do dark things get dark? How do they become
Mm.
who they are? Right? We talk about Magneto in X-Men,
Mm.
for example. So anyway, we have now this. What's going on now is the scenario where the king can't get to his kids. The brothers are swans and they're gone. The daughter
Mm.
doesn't know what to do.
Mhm.
In Jackie Morris's version, the daughter's dog leads her back to the castle before the father gets there. The father's looking for the sons, and the witch casts all these spells on her to make her look terrifying. And when the
Right.
king comes back, he doesn't recognize his daughter and kicks her out. So the daughter's out
Yeah.
in the wilderness. And in the other one, in Martin Shaw's version, she just goes on her own to find them. So
Mm.
there's two different tellings. One, the witch is like, "Sure, welcome back," and then just makes her look terrifying, and the king casts her out. The other one, she just goes. But either way, she's cast out into the wilderness, and she needs to figure out what to do. How many times
Mhm.
have we been there, right?
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to call her Eliza, because that's what
That's
she's
a good
called in
name.
Jack. Yeah. Um, and she's wandering the wilderness. And in one of the versions, she ends up at a woodsman's hut, and that's where she finds her brothers. In the other one, she ends up by the sea, and they find her, and she has to figure out what to do now. And in the one with the woodsman's hut, the brothers reveal to her that the only way that she can save them is if she knits them all sweaters, using something called aster flower, which has no nettles or burning involved. Aster flower. I looked up aster flower. There's no mention of her hands burning, but the nettles are in Jackie Morris's. So she has to knit them from some strange plant. One of them inflicts pain, but both tasks require her to remain silent the entire time. And it will take her 6 years. In Jackie Morris's version, she learns that the
And we know
swans,
that six is an important number too, because in all fairy tales, threes are
right,
an important number.
right. In Jackie Morris's, there's a little more detail. The swans can fly during the day,
Mhm.
but But as soon as the sun sets, they'll fall to their death. So they have to be landed.
They have to be, yeah, because they'll go
Yep.
back to being human.
Yep. And during the summer for 11, which I thought was interesting, 11 days, they flew back home to see their mother's grave and to find Eliza. And she can choose between seeing them 11 days out of the year or going with them, because they go south after those 11 days and they stay in this other place. They don't really
Mhm.
describe where the other place is. It's just south.
In
So,
Grimm's, it's like another oasis type island, like a safe
yes.
haven.
Yes. So she decides, I can knit this a net and you can carry me over the sea to this far place. I want to stay with you.
Mhm.
So they decide to do it. They fly her over. And while she goes over, she finds Morgana, Queen of the Fairies. This is in Jackie Morris's version. And
Whoa!
she sees,
Multi-universes coming together?
yes, and she sees this in the sky. They get to their island, their place, where there's a cave. They settle down there. And she's like, all right, we're living here. Cool. We're in another land. And she dreams. She's like, in her dreams, I need a solution. How do I save my brothers? And Morgana visits her. So she had seen Morgana in the clouds,
Oh,
goes to sleep. Morgana's like, hey, girl, let me talk to you. Here's what you need to do. And
I'm
Morgana's like,
loving this.
yeah, it's really interesting. Morgana's like, so can you handle this? And Eliza's like, what? And she's like, I need you to knit 12 sweaters out of nettles, and it's going to suck. It's going to burn. It's going to be painful. Like, try it, touch it. And Eliza's like, okay. But she doesn't flinch. Like, she tries to touch it, and she's like, no, I can do this. I'm doing it. She agrees. And also Morgana says, and you can't talk. Can you do it? And I actually find myself angry at Morgana. I'm like, what? Like, why are you inflicting this poor kid? Like, why are you doing this? But that's the longer version. So,
But isn't it just a mechanism to deliver the thing that this whole fairy tale is about?
sure. Yeah, but I found myself asking like questions like, but why though? But don't we say that whenever something happens, right? But why do I carry this burden?
Right.
But this is the burden, right? She's going to be in pain and she's not going to be able to communicate to save these people who she loves. So,
Also, just flying off the cuff, because this is what I do. I'm annoying. I interject. The being delivered hard news or being dealt some painful truths, I would rather have it be given to me by a fucking magical, wise queen of fairies than anyone else. Like, what if it was like an asshole that delivered the news really horribly? I bet she had a ring to her magical
yeah,
tone.
she was like, honey, I love you, but listen,
Mm-hmm.
this is how it's going
Deliver
to
it with
go.
love.
And maybe this isn't her fault. Maybe this is what the curse wrought by that angry witch. This
Yeah.
is the only way you could fix it.
Yeah.
So either way, in Martin Shaw's, where she finds out what she must do, or in Jackie Morris's, she has agreed to the task. She's going to be knitting.
Mm-hmm.
And in the longer version, knitting with something that will cause her great pain, and she will not be
Yeah.
able to speak. So the nettles are growing outside the cave. She starts knitting. And there's something that Martin Shaw said again that I really loved. And he said, silence is the cost here. That kind of focus attracts people. And this is when enter the prince. There's a prince that finds her. And she's this wild, like, to him. Don't forget, this is a princess, by the way. She's a princess, but she's in the wild. She's been basically exiled. And she's, think about it. She can't speak. And she's knitting sweaters out of nettles, which to anyone from the outside, they're like, what? But that kind of focus attracts people. And the prince is like, huh, this vision. And here's a quote from Jackie Morris's book, because her book deals a lot with when you're silent, people impose on you what they want to hear or what they want to think. So he saw only what he wanted to see, a proud, fierce young beggar woman. In his head, he found words for her, the words he wished to hear. And I wrote down that she had been raised a princess, though he just didn't know. And I think I had so many feelings about that. People will judge based on what they see, but they don't know you. Right? You're a
I also
princess,
love
but
that he's like, I'm going to give you the words that you haven't given me.
yeah.
Like, oh, thanks. No one asked you.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So, and also just, yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. So this prince finds her and he takes her. He's like, honey, I'll take you. Like, I'll take care of you. And she's like, she can't say anything. So she takes her sweaters and she makes sure he takes all the sweaters with them and all the knitting supplies, and she goes. And like in Jackie Morris's version, the brothers come home because they were out that day and she's gone. They don't know where she is. So now she's in another era of the story. She's living, cut to, she's living in this, community. It sounds like a royal community. He's a prince, sounds like a kingdom, and he's going to marry her. Somehow we get to that. He's going to marry her. She hasn't said a word, right? She's this mysterious being. No one really understands her.
And she's focusing on knitting as well, right? So she's busy. She's busy
She's
doing her own thing.
Yeah, she's busy doing her own thing, and it's not fun, right? So in Jackie Morris's version, she's treated as a princess, and everyone in the community comes to her daily, and they talk to her, and she listens to them. They tell her things that gets cute, like, I'm in love with him and I don't want to say it. And they tell her things that are scary, like, I did this really bad thing. She's like everyone's, it's not scapegoat, but she's like everyone's dumping ground. Yep. And she's just kind of there. She's just taking it because she's really just focused on this one thing,
Right.
And because she's quiet and everyone is going to write their own story about her, here come character. It's two different kinds of characters. In Jackie Morris's, it's a priest, and in Juliet's, it's a priest, and in Martin Shaw's, it's a very jealous and untrusting mother. So, they're doing the same thing, but they're two different people. So the prince's mother in Martin Shaw's is like, I don't trust her, and she, in Martin Shaw's version, she ends up giving birth, and the mother smears chicken blood on her face and says she's a cannibal. In Jackie Morris's version, the priest is like, I want to get with you. And she's like, she can't say anything, but she refuses him basically non-verbally. And so in revenge, the priest calls her a witch. So he doesn't get what he wants. So he calls her a witch. The mother isn't liking this girl for her son. So she claims she's a cannibal. And both of those people end up having her burned at the stake, want her to be burned at the stake. And because she can't defend herself, so she's basically tried by the people who've decided they're going to lie about her. And all the while this is happening, she's still knitting these sweaters and she's believing in it and she's working and fighting for it. And she can't say a word. She's just working and working. And this is the part in the story when you start feeling that in your chest. You're like, oh, like, she's like, you know what? I have no other choice. This is what I'm going to do. I don't really care. I don't care what people think anymore. I'm doing this. I can relate to that so much, So on her way to the pyre, she's knitting. I love this vision. It's the same in both stories. She's knitting, knitting, knitting. She gets to the pyre. She's about to burn. The sticks are lit, and in come the swans swooping, and she throws the sweaters on them one by one. And there was one arm in one sweater that wasn't finished. And that brother, he turns back to a human, but he still has a wing. And here are the two things she says in the different versions of the story. In Martin Shaw's, she says, now I have a voice. Now I have a story. My bitch of a mother-in-law took my children, smeared my mouth with chicken blood. And the truth was seen. And then in Jackie Morris's story, it's softer but intense because the prince tries for a little while to fight the priest, but he doesn't really take charge of the situation. And he has a lot of explaining to do. And so the last chapter in Jackie Morris's book is him apologizing and them having a healing conversation about the trauma he imparted on her. And there's this whole line where he apologizes and she has to, and they heal because she ends up saying, I love you. You have been great for me, but you kind of abandoned me. What's up with that? So there's a reckoning at the end where she finally gets to tell her truth and people have to be held accountable. And I think in Martin Shaw's, the mother ends up getting burned at the stake. And the big difference here from Juliet's book that I originally read, Daughter of the Forest, is the prince isn't involved. He's away. And the priest takes advantage of that and tries her. So the prince isn't actually responsible in that story, and he comes back and he saves her, and it's great. That's why it's still my favorite version. But in these two, there's some very real, elements that we can relate to: being abandoned by someone, lies being told about us by someone we thought we could trust or maybe hoped we could trust, and what the fallout is from that.
Mm-hmm.
So, both end with her in this righteous state. She has her brothers, she has this man she loves, whether, she had to fight for that love back or, regain his trust, and has this kingdom that's fertile and rich and ripe. But she had to fight for a lot of years and has a lot of wounds from it. In Juliet's book, there is a violent scene. I think I did say in the first episode that she does get raped in that story. And the thing I love about Juliet's writing is that she doesn't let the characters just be fine. She makes sure you understand that these characters that go through these trials have leftover trauma at the end. And I think that that's important in fairy tales or any story, that we all get, we can get our victories, but we have to also like take care of and heal the wounds we've gotten and not ignore them.
Mm.
So that is the new paths this story can take. Again, the structure, the bones, the skeleton of the story is the same, but we have a few different elements. And so I'd love to hear where you're at with the story now.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Pause for listener reflection.
Yeah. How do you feel? Where are you at in your story? How does the story make you feel?
I think for me, I love that we revisited this.
Mm-hmm.
And revisiting tales are really important. And for me, the revisiting has made me realize that the requirement for Eliza to be silent, for the princess to be silent, is something that I have experienced myself around being or experiencing a form of depression, and that I don't speak to it. I've come from a value system or a structure where maybe I've misinterpreted it at some point in my life, but I assumed that I wasn't supposed to share my struggles with anyone, that I was supposed to bear my burdens and contribute to other people's joys, healings, justice, and not to speak on when I am suffering. Um, and that's come from a good chunk of my understanding around what is justice, and that my privilege has afforded me so much, and that really my suffering is just so tiny in comparison to the context of worldwide suffering. And I think it's done a little bit of discredit to me because I've devalued the importance of sharing when I am not okay. And the other part of my personality is this joyous, exaltive, bliss person, which is not inauthentic. It isn't coming from, oh, let me put a different lens on this suffering. It's not like I'm keeping a secret and I've put up a front to distract from it. I just have multifacets to my personality, and one is really high vibes, and of course that's the one that I'm like way more comfortable expressing on the daily, both because I can't even contain it, but also it's a much more palatable part of me. And to break, my own enchantment is to break the silence that I don't share when I'm suffering. And I have a kind of tendency to be like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, until I'm not. And I am leaning in to exploring being much more honest and much more present in sharing my emotions, which help validate my depression, helps validate my experiences, stops disassociating with the more the parts of me that are begging to be witnessed, that are begging to be held. So for me, I was thinking about the enchantment of silence and the power of breaking that silence.
Mm,
I think it's very interesting to lean into both grief, sorrow, depression, and rage. And these kind of new eras of fairy tales being an opportunity to be like, okay, well, if these atrocities are happening, if these near misses and narrow escapes are happening, what comes with that is volatile, strong, explosive, or um, implosive emotions. So being a little bit more real and gritty about it is kind
yeah.
of where I'm at.
Wow.
Yeah, and for me, like, just even being able to, from time to time when I'm talking with you and my other friends, to be a bit more specific about what depression is for me, because I think
Hmm.
there's when you talked about what people think when silence doesn't give you the information.
Yep.
I'm assuming that because I haven't been very clear about when I am in a depressed state, people assume everything's fine and that I don't have any issues. And no, of course, no one thinks that if you take a beat, but if you do not know when someone is struggling, then you just don't know.
I'm amazed at everything you just said. I think
Mhm.
part of this is, listeners, Rudo and I have been friends for eons of time in
Mhm.
our teenage years, in a hard, tumultuous, years of youth when we're in college. And, um, you know, when I was younger, I did assume that you were fine, which is an
Mhm.
unrealistic thing to assume.
Mhm.
I think that sometimes people want there to be a person who doesn't break because we need someone who doesn't break. And then if you take that role upon yourself, whether you realize it or not, all of us are at a disservice because the truth is there's a lot of important stuff in the dark parts and things to learn. And learning how to move through grief and find the gems in there is really what life is all about, I really think. And it's
Yeah,
really
me too.
cool for me to hear you say all this. I think
Mhm.
it's very inspiring. It makes me feel happy for you because you have a right to, like, no matter how much privilege anyone has, you get to have your grief and your depression and the things that are hard for you, and you get to ask for help and support. Everyone does. Everyone needs that. So so is it feeling kind of like that epic ending when she's like, "Now I can speak." Do you feel a little bit like, does it feel good to say these things out loud, or is it a little uncomfortable?
I think I probably have some um compassion and familiarity with the prince that's half swan, half human.
Hmm.
Like for me, swans are a very interesting symbol because I know that from a distance, as in literal distance, they are incredibly astounding, beautiful, graceful, peaceful looking things. And
Hmm.
symbolically, they are a symbol of purity and grace and perfection. Have y'all ever been real close to a swan,
No, they're
to
actually
a motherfucking
dangerous.
swan?
Yeah, they're
They're
actually not.
terrifying. They're
They're not safe. Yeah,
huge.
yeah. They're.
So,
I remember running screaming from a swan, or like being in a situation where we were trying to get away. So like they're not nice. And it was interesting that you brought this up because I was like, when I was researching these, I was like, why swans though? Like, why were we talking about swans in these tales? Like, why was that the animal? Why do you think that was? You have any thoughts
yeah, I
on
think
that?
well, because they look majestic as fuck. I think
Mm-hmm.
they've always been associated with royalty, and royalty has always been ascribed or akin to perfect and pure,
Mm,
and flawless. So I
true.
think yeah, it's just a universal symbol of a certain amount of purity and perfection. Um, but then, like anything else, there is the actual reality of these symbols or these animals in this case. So yeah, I feel very kindred spirit to this half swan beast, half young prince where I am a little bit uncomfortable with my new modality of speaking about feeling low, and I immediately want to course correct, and I'm just like witnessing it. I'm just
Yeah.
here for it.
Yeah. It's a process, I think.
Sure.
Right. I mean, this is a new healing thing, I think. What will come next is to be
Definitely.
seen, right? It's going to be an up and down. It's going to be,
Yeah.
but the thing is, I was wondering, I had a question in my mind as you were speaking about when you said, I feel like I should be the one bringing the vibe, the high vibes. Do you think that,
100%.
but do you, and you're good at that, but do you think, as someone who knows you very well and has been in a lot of intimate situations with you, do you think that part of your struggles with sharing is because you almost feel sad that you aren't feeling that at the moment, because it's like that is who you are, and like when you're not feeling that, that's probably sad for you. You're like, why am I not feeling that way? Like, I want to be, I'm going to do it anyway. You know what I mean? Because do you feel like that's part of it? Does that make sense? Like, I was thinking, I wonder if part of it is like, man, I just don't want to be in this place, which none of us do, but maybe it's extra hard for you since that feels like your thing. I could be totally
I
wrong.
think you're speaking to no, I think you're speaking to self-compassion and
Yeah.
self-acceptance,
Yeah.
and that's the journey.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. And also a little bit of what use am I if I'm not playing this role?
Ooh.
So there's a little bit of self-worth in there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Like, can
much
I even take
worth.
up space if I'm not being useful? Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all can relate to that, and the answer is yes. Like, you don't have to always be a certain way to be useful. What does useful mean?
And don't I become a more trustworthy person when you get to see all of me?
Yes.
You know, I struggle with this because I understand from a corporate workplace setting.
Mhm.
Not everyone's in a corporate place, but most people are in a workspace.
Mm.
And I think there is an assumption that if you are in charge or in a leadership position, you actually are only allowed to show one face and you have to be like kind of unruffable and that's 100%. I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, it's not right.
That is inauthentic.
Yeah, it is. And I think our society is coming to a reckoning with that on many different levels. I think we're all starting to
I
talk
hope
about
so.
how to be more authentic and, with all the strikes going on, we are not happy in these workplaces. We are not getting what we deserve. I'm not pretending I'm fine anymore. That's and the amount of vitriol that comes at that, like, just be happy with what you have. It's like, no, I'm allowed to ask for more. I deserve more. Like, it's a hard thing to say. Like, I've been working on saying that, but you do. Like, we all deserve better. So,
Yeah, and I think we're also like what you're saying, we're little mini reflections of the world that we see. Like
yeah,
everything that we play out in our own daily lives is an
yeah,
opportunity to see that as a symbolic representation of the world at large. And
yeah,
if we are incapable of faking it, then that's a sign of
yeah,
things to come.
yeah. And the more we like give voice to these things, the more balanced we are, and then we can like work through them and heal from them and then have better lives. But, grief and like depression and struggling, that's a part of it, not separate from it. It's a part of the cycle. And if we're
Hmm.
cutting out one part, then we're kind of hollow. So
Hmm.
we need to be addressing these
Incomplete.
things. Yep. And that's what these stories were about. That's why they're so harsh and hard. They are about that. They were meant to
Yes.
help us understand and learn, and so that's why we love them, right?
Yeah.
We don't realize it, but we do. And when they started, in Disney movies, sugarcoating them, it was like, no,
Doing
don't
a
sugarcoat them.
disservice.
No,
Total disservice.
don't take out that part. And then
Hmm.
isn't that interesting that even culturally, they took it out of even children's stories for kids. So the kids didn't even get to see the
Yeah.
darkness. And so we just trained everyone to be fine, fine, fine until we're
Yeah.
not and we flip out. Yeah.
Hmm.
You don't
Of
have to flip out.
course.
You can
Yeah.
work through. Yeah.
Of course I think that way.
Yeah.
If all of my stories and material that I was given as a child was rage belongs here in the dark side. Um, Sorrow or grief or depression doesn't even exist.
Yeah. 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 And then there's another side of this, which is, I think I'm on the opposite side. I've had a lot of things in my life that have made me feel, I think I have a lot of joy and zest for life, of course. I really do. You know that I have a passion for things. I
Mhm.
get excited about things, but I think I'm more cynical, and I think I'm more into I have a more dark outlook because I've had some pain, a lot of it actually. And I think I need that truth to help me feel authentic,
Mhm.
because sometimes when I hear ultra positive things, I'm like, I'm sorry, but no, like that's not how it is. But I don't want to be down there all the time. But sometimes it's safer to be down there because then you're not disappointed. And I think that that's something I'm thinking a lot about. And it's a hard one because I don't quite know how to shift that. However, um, if you don't mind, can I share where I'm
Mhm.
at?
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you wanted to share, what you were saying?
I mean, I might react to what you're about to say. I'm really
That's
excited to
great.
hear about where
Please
you're
do.
at.
Yeah, me, it's more of a general assessment. I was thinking about when we were meeting about this the first time and talking about it, and I was in a deep state of grief still. I remember feeling a lot more shaky. Um, I had lost my cat. My old life was it was more raw. My old life had died. I was definitely more raw. Um, I'm still like reckoning with all of that, but I feel it less. It's integrated. It's integrating. New growth has occurred since then, and I had this kind of thought because I think Martin Shaw said at the end of the story she was flanked by her brothers.
Mm.
And I've been saying this since I was starting to get my tattoos over the last year and a half. I want to be flanked by mugwort and hares, and now I am. I have matching tattoos on both arms. I am flanked by magical plants and animals, and I feel powerful. Like not unlike the king's daughter, I'm flanked by sacred creatures and plants, and I feel that choice to get those on me, it's like a powerful path. Now I'm on a path I've set myself on, and I don't think I would feel as steady on that path if I hadn't gone through all of the trials. I wish some of the things hadn't happened to me.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say that everything happens for a reason. It's fine, but something in this lifetime I need to experience. I'm going to believe that. I'm finding and using my voice and cultivating my own focus as she is knitting her sweaters. I am knitting and weaving the life I want, and it doesn't always look logical. And I'm leaning more and more into towards the things that are more authentic to me. And that means putting my art out there, investing in that. It feels like a lost in the wilderness. It's like, where do I fit? How do I do this? And but that's what feels true to me. So I'm on that path, and my feet are grounded there.
Mm.
I that's what kind of came up as I was revisiting these stories. Hearing her like yell righteously finally on that pillar, like as she was about to burn, and like she throws those sweaters on. That's a place I want to be. Like now you can hear me.
Mm.
Stop assuming things about me. This is me. Take it or leave it, kind of thing. And I love that vision in my head of
I
her.
do
I,
too.
I am her. I want to be her as much as possible. Perhaps the more I read new versions of the story, the more I'll find. Perhaps different things will reveal themselves based on my phase of life. But that image of her throwing the sweaters over her brothers as she's about to burn, it feels epic and important. And it's the same in every story. It's her absolution, her victory, her commitment to herself and the people and things she loves. Yeah, that's my goal. And so, yeah, do I feel pain and am I mourning and am I struggling? Yeah. Do I feel more authentic in myself? Yeah. Uh, do I want to feel more joy? Yes. Um, I try. I will try. I will keep trying. My heart just keeps breaking, but
Mm.
maybe that's just the way it's going to be. So,
I
oh,
hear
these
both of
swans.
us.
Yeah.
Oh, these swans. Oh god, that's the line. Oh, these swans. I hear both of us leaning into a level of truthfulness.
hmm
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
And I also hear to what you caught when you were like, and the last chapter is righteous validation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
And you believing in yourself the whole time, even though no one else did.
Yeah.
And the people who stuck by your side.
Mm.
And those are
And
the
I like,
people that matter.
can we unpack like being flanked? You know, like the tattoos are a level of presence.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to my beloved, and he was saying how for him the tattoo experience is the experience, and then he like
Yeah.
hardly ever thinks about his tattoos after that.
Oh,
Which is, I was like, what? That
that's
is
not me. No, that's,
really,
yeah.
really different. But I
Yeah.
don't know if it's like chicken or the egg. Is it because we are highly aesthetic artists who
Probably.
consider the longevity of this image that is on us, and the image
Yeah.
itself has way higher importance for us. Aesthetics has way higher importance for us. Or is it just that we think really differently about tattoos?
It's just all intense for me. Like the process is like church for me. It's like a sacred time. And my tattoo artist is bomb. Like I should link her. She's amazing. If anyone's in
I will
Pittsburgh,
make a note.
go. Yeah. She is an absolute magical witch, and she has been healing me.
We should do an episode on tattoos.
Maybe she'll come on, but she has been healing me with the tattoos, and I'm only letting her tattoo me. I have plans, and it's been a sacred act. It's been helping in my grief and processing everything. And that's why I probably feel a little bit better than I do the last time we talked about this. I think getting those tattoos was a huge step in the right direction for me. It was symbolic. And now it's just as important when I see them, because I see them and I'm like, cool, still on the path, and now I'm protected. That's what it feels like. So it's like a commitment. It's a commitment because you're never getting rid of it. And like you've committed. You're like, I am committed to this. Can't take it back. To yourself. That's what
Yeah,
it
and I
means to
think
me. Everyone's the same, but that's what it is to me. So
I think as two people, and you can absolutely push back if this is me telling your story and that's not fair. It, I assume that us as two people who have not actually felt the surrounding, like the presence of all of that huge amount of family as Eliza would have felt with her brothers, we're a part of what we're doing is kind of creating a sense of that deep many hands around me. Like there is a family structure that we've been given, especially in America, where we're so isolated that sense of a whole village is surrounding me or a whole clan is surrounding me. And if we had been given more ancestral worship practices, maybe we would feel spirits more clearly around me. We've had to work really hard to actually feel surrounded,
yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
absolutely. That's it. I mean, it was a
Slight
commitment.
digression from our point, but still.
It's not. I mean, it's a part of it. We're making our own family,
Mm.
both spiritually and with the people we find that stuck by us the whole time. So, it's important. Family, community, the people who don't put upon you but listen even when you can't speak,
Yeah.
which is possible. You can listen even though you're not speaking. You can hear the silence, if you, instead of putting something on the person. And
You could just allow them to
yeah.
be
Mm-hmm.
complex but silent and
Yeah.
not project.
Yeah. We all could do with doing that for each other. Right.
Heck yeah. That's a personal commitment of mine as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to project any stories onto somebody. If I don't have information, I don't have information.
Yeah. This is hard stuff. It's not easy, but these stories are rich with these lessons, which is why we go here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my first introduction of the wild swans didn't have this level of persecution that um I've come to realize that is actually a part of the story.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that I didn't um land on that. So like my childhood experience of this story is much more about the actual trial, the rite of passage of pain
Yeah.
of those stinging nettles. But now it's like, as I'm deepening into my womanly journey, it's the imposement of silence
Yeah. Not
and
being able to be,
the breaking of it.
yeah, not being seen and
Mm.
feeling abandoned and mislabeled and misunderstood
Mm.
and lost. I
Ugh.
mean, there's so many pieces. We could
Yeah.
talk about it again, and we probably will. We probably will, and that's the cool part.
It does seem to be a pretty pivotal story that our parallel lives are
Yeah.
anchoring to.
Yeah. Agreed. How do we feel? Do we
So
feel?
I'm very impressed with us.
Yeah, I am too. I also was thinking, I wonder how they haven't made a movie about this yet.
They have.
What? Oh,
Well, are you talking about like a live action movie?
yeah,
Okay.
not a
Because
cartoon.
there's
I
like a
mean,
zillion cartoons.
I should check that out. I think isn't there a Russian animation too?
Yeah, so
I
some of them are real weird. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
say, be warned.
but I mean like
Cartoons
live
from the
action.
'60s are
Yeah,
strange,
cartoons
but
from the '90s are strange, but yeah.
true, true, true.
But yeah, I will check those out. But I was imagining like a feature film, like 2-hour feature film. That would be
I would love
interesting.
that,
Yeah.
especially seeing somebody transform in and out of swan state
Hmm.
into human state. Fuck yeah.
Without it being tacky, like it would have to be done Golden Compass style, like
Yeah.
you know,
The tech is there now.
yeah. But I feel like this is winding down. What I do
Mhm,
hope is that people listening are seeing where this lands for them.
mhm.
Um, where are you in the story?
Or a different story,
Is there a
this is
different
the
story?
thematic.
Yeah.
How are your fairy tales? Favorite fairy tales? Opportunities for you to reflect on your life.
Yeah. They really open things up, and I'm amazed at where we go when we really dive into them, what they do. So I hope you spend some time. We hope you spend some time finding out more, being curious. Because these stories are around us everywhere and we don't even realize it sometimes, but they're really important.
Yeah.
So, with that,
So with that,
with that, thank you so much for listening.
mhm,
And check out our show notes. There'll be inspirational links and resources for you.
we're gonna keep going on this topic um, in terms of the framework of magic, myth, fairy tales, creativity, friendship. Stay
Yes.
tuned for more.
Stay tuned for more. And the music we use for our podcast is called Whimsical Aliens. It was written and performed by Alejandro Bernard from Ithaca, New York. Please subscribe and like
Ali.
his music. Ali! Please subscribe and like his music tutorials on YouTube. They are so charming. You can become a patron to his work on Patreon as well. And Bjorn always edits and produces our podcasts. We really are very appreciative of that. Thank you. And see you next time.
Yeah, check out our links in the podcast episode. Also, check out our Substack. Check out our YouTube. We are expanding.
We are expanding like
We
the
have
wings of a
expanded.
swan. Bye.
Bye.